Our society is in the process of breaking down all around us, and signs of its impending collapse are everywhere. Have you noticed that nowadays people don't treat one another with the same level of respect and civility that they once did? Americans are constantly fighting with each other, and these days it feels like most people can't solve anything through dialogue and empathy, and this should greatly alarm all of us. The worsening polarization across our nation can be a contributing factor, but recently even those that are supposedly on the same side are treating each other with extreme contempt. Conservatives are fighting with conservatives, liberals are fighting with liberals, Christians are fighting with Christians, and we're also seeing families break up all over the place. Hearts are growing so cold, and all of the conflict and discord that we are witnessing right now is leaving us wondering about what things will be like when economic conditions in this nation start falling apart in the months ahead. And that's what we're going to discuss in today's video. Our society is getting more and more divided, and maybe this is why we have so much anger and hatred growing all around our nation. At this point, it seems like a large portion of our population doesn't possess even the most basic level of sympathy and compassion for their fellow citizens, and that has frightening implications for the future of America. Given that we have become disturbingly disconnected from each other, we tend to focus on what's happening inside our social bubble and forget the narratives others are living. But when we take a step back and take a deeper look at our current situation, the extent to which our society has already deteriorated is quite shocking. There is so much rage and indignation in the air right now, and we're most certainly seeing this being reflected in the rates of severe delinquencies and offenses being recorded at this moment. For instance, CNBC reports that burglaries in San Francisco are up by 42% over the past year. In the Northern District, which includes Pacific Heights, the Marina, North Beach, and Cal Marlow, it's up 59%. In the Mission, 79%, and in the Richmond, up 50%. People in the city's northern neighborhoods like North Beach, Russian Hill, and Pacific Heights say they're experiencing break-ins daily. In the last 2 quarters of 2022, there have been 5,118 burglaries in the city, and surveillance cameras have caught many of these thieves over the last couple of months. In some neighborhoods, the same offenders are returning multiple times, and things have gotten so extreme that one local resident recently admitted that she is in a constant state of alarm. Thieves are returning to the same homes and neighborhoods within the same week, sometimes only 1 day apart, the report says. It's a big wave of transgression right now, so many home burglaries. This is scary. I cannot sleep at night anymore, said resident Erna Gorb. Another local named Alex Miller says that thieves broke into her house and stole the presents her family and friends had given her to congratulate her on her wedding. We were supposed to get married in April, postponed until next year. We had a lot of wedding gifts in there, and they got stolen. It was a lot of miscellaneous things and sporting equipment, Miller said. Many other San Francisco residents have shared similar stories of thieves breaking into their garages or homes and stealing expensive bicycles, scooters, and whatever they can get their hands on. One thing most of them also have in common is the fact that they haven't seen security being boosted by local authorities, despite the rise in such unlawful acts. It's hard to imagine what it must be like lying in bed wondering if this will be the night when the burglars will return again, or just not knowing if your belongings will be there when you wake up the next morning. On top of widespread cases of home invasions, San Francisco's businesses are also recording mass break-ins. Security footage from a Pacific Heights food market a week and a half ago shows a suspect seen setting up a blowtorch on the store's glass. When it doesn't budge, he comes back and tries throwing a plant at the break-in, the report highlights. The lawlessness piece of it is disturbing, Miller added. Some people have seen second break-ins just recently, and it's just unacceptable. We need to see some actions and not just words, Corp stressed. Unfortunately, we're seeing similar scenes play out all around the United States night and day, and nothing really changes. With rampant unemployment and a fast declining economy, it's safe to say that this is only going to get worse in the coming months. On the East Coast, things are no different. Official numbers show that New York City has also seen a 42% rise in burglaries in the past 12 months, and the number of outrageous wrongdoings that has resulted in fatalities has risen by a staggering 91% over that same span. No wonder why approximately 299,557 people have already moved out of the city in search of a safer place to live in 2022, according to data from the U.S. Census. Currently, extremely wicked acts continue to occur in our major cities, and such incidents are happening so frequently that they barely make a blip in the news. In Chicago, public hospitals report that 50% of victims arriving with severe injuries caused by immoral offenders are children under the age of 10, and about 37% of them lose their lives in a hospital bed. Is this what America has become? Have we become a place where the lives of children under the age of 10 are at risk? How can parents raise their kids safely in such chaotic environments? What's even sadder is the fact that many children out there are also victims of their own parents. For example, due to the worst addiction crisis this country has ever seen, many babies are addicted to illegal substances from the moment they're born. In fact, in the city of Baltimore, approximately 1 out of every 4 babies is born dependent on opioids. Doctors at Mount Washington Pediatric Hospital say babies born with neonatal abstinence syndrome, a set of conditions caused by withdrawal from exposure to illegal substances, now account for 25% of the hospital's admissions. That's so wrong on so many levels, and it means that the future of many of these babies is taken from them before they even have the opportunity to know the world. Evil seems to be spreading out of control in this nation. Not even those who are meant to protect us are truly safe. New reports also detail that law enforcement agents are under constant attack. According to a press release from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division just a couple of weeks ago, 2 agents were ambushed and attacked by vicious predators that pretended to be victims of a domestic fight. The officers were responding to a domestic violence call when they were surprised by a group that stole their self-defense weapons and used them against the agents. The case left their families in shock and deeply traumatized. This should scare us all. Not even the people who are trained and possess the tools to defend others and themselves are immune from the wave of hostility that is gripping our society. The institutions that we all take for granted on a daily basis are being dismantled by malicious perpetrators that are infiltrating our major cities. Our moral values have been relegated to the fringes of society, and so we should not be surprised that our communities are now literally coming apart at the seams right before our eyes. One recent Gallup poll asked the question, how would you rate the overall state of moral values in this country today? As excellent, good, only fair, or poor? And the results were troubling. Almost half, 49% of Americans responded that the United States' moral values are poor. Just 14% called them excellent or good. And most Americans do not feel like we are moving in the right direction either. When asked if U.S. moral values are getting better or worse, respondents have been consistently and overwhelmingly negative since the poll began, and this year was no different. Some 77% of us feel that American morals are on the decline, while just 18% say they're getting better. But if you think what we have experienced so far is unnerving, just wait until the ongoing economic downturn accelerates even further. Chaos, savagery, and disorder on our streets has become the norm, and we're living in a society where hate is dictating the acts of many. However, we must also face the fact that millions of people have rejected the simple values that once united our nation, and so our society will continue to melt down in plain sight as we plunge into a deeply uncertain future. You want to know how extreme is the social decline decline that is spreading all over the United States. All you need to do is walk the streets of our bigger cities. You don't even have to go to the bad areas to see the absurdities that are eating away our communities and destroying them from within. As we will show you in this video, even in the best parts of Washington, D.C., filth, squalor, and disease are everywhere. New images show that only a couple of blocks away from the White House, countless can be seen on the ground. Homeless encampments are taking over national parks, and the rate of delinquencies has spiked to the highest levels in history. The same is true for many other areas that used to be prosperous and economically and socially stable. Unfortunately, their decay is happening at a frightening pace and will only continue to accelerate as economic conditions go from worse to catastrophic in 2023. We have a lot to cover in this video. Some people may not believe this, but at one point, Philadelphia was one of the greatest cities in the world. But nowadays, the city of Benjamin Franklin is filled with prime examples of the social insanity that is rippling across the country. On Twitter, one user shared a video while walking the city's streets, witnessing dozens of people from different backgrounds passed out on the sidewalks, while others, clearly under the influence of, were in a catatonic state that would shock anyone. But the truth is that, after years of neglect, no one is really surprised to hear that this is going on in Philadelphia. But what about a block from the White House? A video shared by Benny Johnson exposed scenes that seem like they've been taken out of a zombie movie. Exactly one block behind the White House, dozens of homeless encampments were scattered throughout city streets and even into national parks. Severe sanitation issues, including human waste, used needles, and trash piling up everywhere, left Johnson in disbelief. At D.C. Sparkle Street, glass from smashed car windows posed a threat to everyday citizens walking by. Even in front of St. John's Cathedral, garbage dominated the landscape. Until 2017, Johnson said he didn't see a single tent near public buildings. As he interviewed local residents, it became clear that people don't feel safe, and they say that new problems emerge on a daily basis. In fact, local reports reveal that from 2020 to 2022, there was a 36% rise in the rate of serious offenses, with 14% of those leaving fatal victims. At the same time, the rate of cases of illnesses caused by the abuse of illicit substances shot up by almost 70%. Days decay, and people don't care about this nation running things and running them directly into the ground. This is an apt metaphor for a country in decline. Johnson stressed, on the West Coast, things are no different. In recent years, Portland, once considered one of the finest cities in America, has become something short of a dystopia where sharp owners sleep with self-defense tools behind their pillows and citizens must act as law enforcement agents. During an interview with the National Review, Tri-Tech Bikes owners Dylan Carrico Rogers says he slept at his shop for 7 months with multiple self-defense tools under his pillow. Rogers noted that in less than a year, his store was battered by break-ins, theft, and vandalism. One serially understaffed law enforcement agency was nowhere to be found, and in the face of $25,000 of stolen bike parts, Tri-Tech's insurance company was ready to jump ship. They said, if you claim another one, we're just going to drop you, Rogers said. So I'm paying $1,200 every 3 months to be told that I have to replace everything on my own dime. And then at the same time, officers don't show up. So we're just in a free-for-all. In August 2022, the lifelong Portland resident packed up and decided to leave the city. By that point, the building landlord told me that it wasn't worth it anymore. Rogers continued. The graffiti, property damage, constant break-ins, and unattended to official reports were just no longer worth the investment. He tore up a 3-year lease. The building's vacant now, the business owner said. This is the Portland way of life. You have people that are just blatantly taking advantage of the fact that there are no law enforcement officers, Rogers highlighted. This is spread everywhere now. It's not just the Portland bike shops. Grocery store workers are getting attacked because we have addicts that are literally walking in and doing these blitz raids. You're seeing more and more people pull out. he emphasized. And in turn, when people like me and other business owners close up, and we leave, then you have no economy and everything continues to get worse. As businesses depart from core urban areas, the United States is left with even more impoverished cities. Believe it or not, Detroit used to be the largest hub for the US auto industry just a few decades ago, but that rapidly changed after automation and foreign manufacturing reshaped the whole industry, making the number of jobs sharply decline. Today, the city's poverty rate is at a staggering 39.8% of the population. Meanwhile, the rate of serious delinquencies is the second highest in the country. Urban decay is still rife in Detroit while it claws its way back from bankruptcy. Since the turn of the century, it has lost almost 30% of its population, given that conditions continue to deteriorate. Similarly, in the nearby town of Flint, Michigan, the decline of American manufacturing and the financial ruin of many companies that contributed to the growth of the region has resulted in the loss of hundreds of thousands of middle-class jobs. And over the past decade, Flint's population has declined rapidly at a rate of 12.2% per year. Infamously, the city has also suffered from drinking water that had not been properly treated for lead contaminants from old pipes. Now, over 40% of its residents live below the poverty line, and that rate keeps growing with each passing year. The same has happened to St. Louis, Missouri, and Albany, Georgia. Rampant rates of theft have driven thousands of companies out of business, and the ones that survived moved their operations elsewhere. Unemployment rates in these cities have spiked to alarming levels, and according to official data, about 25 and 32% of the citizens currently living in St. Louis and Albany, respectively, are poor or nearly poor. In New York City, poverty levels have become so oppressive that its homelessness crisis is spiraling out of control. The Daily Mail reports that the city has called the National Guard to deal with the displacement crisis that is overwhelming homeless shelters and facilities as the staff are unable to cope with the surge. National Guard reservists are being deployed to help with day-to-day operations at many shelters, including managing the capacity, distributing food, and helping out with star shortages. There are well over 65,000 people currently living in New York City's shelters, close to 13,000 of which have become homeless in the past year, according to the Department of Homeless Services. Do you remember any other period in history in which government officials of any city brought in the National Guard because homelessness had exploded to unprecedented levels? This crisis is unfolding at a pace that is just breathtaking. Unfortunately, desperate people living on the streets are doing desperate things to survive. The Mail reports that even in some of the nicest neighborhoods in the Big Apple, some people are stealing goods and reselling them just a couple of blocks away from where they committed the theft. And those are actually the least worst cases happening out there. According to Joel Kotkin, the presidential fellow in urban futures at Chapman University, an executive director of the Urban Reform Institute, the social decay that is rotting the foundations of U.S. cities is systemic and getting worse over time. When my grandparents migrated to New York from Russia over a century ago, they found the city that was paradise, one that provided a pathway towards a better life, he wrote. However, life was tough, crowded, and always a paycheck from poverty. My relatives were poor, but so was everyone. Eventually, they all bought houses or apartments and entered the middle class. Today's urban promise is vastly different. The researcher notes, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles are no longer cities of aspiration. They are increasingly defined by an almost feudal hierarchy. The rich live well, protected by private security, and served by local coffee shops and trendy clubs. Meanwhile, the working class struggles to pay rent, possesses no demonstrable path to a better life, and as a result, often migrates elsewhere, Kotkin highlights. Offense rates are soaring everywhere, and homelessness, once an exception, is increasingly widespread. Those very streets once said to be paved with gold are now filled with discarded needles, excrement, and graffiti, the expert added. The truth is that entrenched urban poverty in the United States, defined by places where 30% or more of the population live below the poverty line, actually ballooned from 1,100 to 6,400 neighborhoods since the year 2000. Even the controlled media admits that in the past 2 decades, major cities have gone from engines of growth and opportunity to places defined by worsening inequality. Wealth and income disparity is becoming the norm. For example, in the tech haven of San Francisco, which has the worst levels of inequality in California, the top 5% of households earn an average of $808,105 annually, compared to a mere $16,184 for the lowest 20%. That's annually. The old saying that the city air makes one free all too often means freedom to be poor, to experience endemic homelessness, collapsing public infrastructure, and rising neglect. Kotkin says, in the state where it's no longer considered a felony to steal anything worth less than $1,000, there has been property theft, including a huge rise in carjackings. Since 2019, Walgreens closed over 30 outlets in San Francisco due to skyrocketing cases of retail theft and weak law enforcement. At the same time, New York's small businesses experienced a 222% increase in burglaries last year. As cities slowly fall to pieces, they are increasingly becoming no-go zones for investors and business. Barely 10% of U.S. companies are interested in investing in large urban areas, the expert reveals. Sadly, it appears that our leaders are not too worried about restoring the economic and social balance this country needs to start thriving again. Year after year, our social decline intensifies and our major cities continue to collapse all around us. If you love America, you should be completely disgusted by what is happening to our country. What do you think our founders would say if they could see what our cities have become? They would certainly be deeply ashamed of us, and we should be deeply ashamed of ourselves too, because we should have never allowed a beloved country to sink so low.
Was Mr. Rogers trying to warn us? Listen.
I'm very much concerned, as I know you are, about what's being delivered to our children in this country.
Boys are boys from the beginning. Girls are girls right from the start. Everybody's fancy, everybody's fine, your body's fancy, and so is mine. Because sometimes children think that they might change. They might have to change after a while. And, you know, we laugh about that now, but it's because we had that concern when we were little.
Yeah, because you're really not sure. You thought maybe you'd become a girl, or the girl would become a boy, right?
Exactly.
Happens frequently out here.
Only girls can be the mummies. Only boys can grow up and be the daddies. Yes, sir. Or a girl can be someday a lady, and a boy can be someday a man.